Hey guys, it's Aaron here at Sword Carolina. We have had some requests in Sword Carolina Online for some basic footwork drills, and so I'm doing a series on them with simple footwork drills, gradually growing more complicated, starting solo, moving up into paired footwork drills. This is going to be the first video in that series that I'm sharing with you on YouTube here. It is the purpose and the problems with footwork drills. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks a lot. So what is the purpose of a footwork drill? Well, here at Sword Carolina, we usually use footwork drills as part of our warm-up. So one of the most basic things is that it lets us warm up our bodies before we start doing more challenging things. Before we start moving full speed, before we start trying to cut targets or move through techniques realistically, we need to make sure we have a good warm-up. So footwork drills enable us to do that. It's also a better warm-up, generally speaking, than just doing squats and sit-ups and push-ups, because you're reinforcing things that you need to know. These are basic foundational tools that you really need in your repertoire. Footwork drills aren't necessarily the most stylish or the most enjoyable things to do. But I find doing them as part of the warm-up gets them out of the way, and it gets you some much needed practice. This is something that everyone needs. New people need it because they don't really know how to move properly. They don't know how to move their body through space in a way that's going to make sense in wrestling, that's going to make sense in fencing. So the footwork drills are very important. But it's also important for the more veteran students and instructors here to practice it as well, because those are foundational principles that you will lose if you don't focus on them. You will find yourself getting sloppy. So first of all, what is the purpose of a footwork drill? In my mind, I want to practice my footwork enough and well enough so that when I am fighting, when I'm doing a technique, I do not have to think about what my feet are doing. If we're at the point where I have to think about, okay, I need to step here, I need to do different steps, I will be too slow. I don't have time to focus on that, right? I don't have time to think about what my feet are doing. I barely have time to think about what my hands are doing. I want everything to flow naturally. So the whole idea of the footwork drill is to make the movements second nature. It is just how my body has learned to naturally move when I'm fighting, when I'm wrestling. It's also, oddly enough, infected how I just move through space in my day-to-day life. It's bleeded over into everything else, which I think is a good thing. Now let me tell you about some of the problems that I generally see with footwork drills. So first of all, usually the first problem I see is people are standing far too upright. They're worrying about the steps. You know, I'm taking a passing step and they're worrying about where to place the steps, but now they're not standing in a realistic position. You wouldn't never want to fight this way. My center of gravity is very high. I'm too easy to unbalance. I have no springs loaded. I'm going to be very slow and easy to defeat. So when you're doing a footwork drill, you really want to get in your good stance and really do the drill in a very good stance, and I would say even almost an exaggerated stance. Because when we speed things up, when we start to go faster, usually things get sloppier. So when we're doing simple drills, I'm usually stricter on those. Or I'm not just going to get in a regular fighting stance, I'm going to get in a nice deep stance. I'm going to be very balanced. I'm going to be very strict on myself here because I know when I speed up, it'll tend to go a little sloppy. Another thing that we notice is that when people start to get tired, they start to stand up. So even if they start low in a good stance here, as they get tired, they get higher and higher and higher until they're just standing up at the end. And so correction is good for that. Don't chew them out. They don't even know that they're doing it, but let people know. Make those corrections. Hey, lower yourself down. Wait, you're standing up, lower down. One of the biggest ones we see are people not maintaining their balanced stance. So if you remember in our video that we did on the balance stance, we always want to maintain our balance. We don't ever want to lose our balance because we're in a fight. Whether we're wrestling or whether we're fighting with swords, if we lose our balance, we end up falling on the ground, or in a worst case scenario, but we also just lose the ability to fight and defend ourselves effectively when we're out of balance. And so a lot of times when we see the footwork drills, we see people kind of leaning forward. When they're moving forward, they lean forward. When they move back, they lean back. Generally, if I tell people to do one step, they usually do that very well. But if we're doing multiple steps, if I'm doing a drill, we're walking, the length of a floor, that's when you start to see people leaning forward, leaning backward. So this is bad because it's going to reinforce bad habits. So we need to always be on the lookout for that. If you see the head going either in front of the foot or behind the foot, they are off balance, and we need to correct that. A couple things we can do to test balance is, one, we can just randomly call stop in the middle of a long footwork drill. This would be kind of like the red light, green light thing, where I'm doing my footwork and someone says stop, and if I've maintained my balanced stance, I'm gonna be fine. I'll just be able to stop and fight from wherever I am. If I was unbalanced, if I move backwards and lean backwards and someone says stop, you're gonna see these little stutter steps as they try to actually balance themselves. Another thing you can do is to change direction. Changing direction is rather easy if you are balanced. If I stay balanced, I can move from one direction to the other. It's not too difficult. But if I get my weight forward and someone says to change direction, I have to overcome that inertia, move backwards, all right, move forward. It slows everything down, but it's also a tell. So it's a good drill in its own right, but it's also a test to see whether you're staying balanced or not. A further thing I want to talk about with problems is when you're first learning a step. If you're doing a passing step for the first time, I will let you look down at your feet and figure out where everything is going. But once you have the basics down, I don't want you looking at your feet, right? I want you looking up as if you were looking at your opponent, right? As if you were looking out where the danger is, right? So if I get in this habit of looking at my feet, first of all, it's bending my head. It's starting to unbalance me a little bit, but I'm also getting in a bad habit. I'm not looking at where I'm going. And so I need to be able to know where my feet are without actually having to look at them, right? So I need to get that sense, that proprioception, so I can tell where my feet are without having to look at them, but then also reinforce the habit of staying upright, keeping my torso vertical, looking out at my opponent, not having to look at unimportant things like feet and hands. So I can't stress enough to you guys how important footwork is. When we are diagnosing problems with a partner drill, whether it's a simple basic drill or if it's a technique that we pull straight out of the manuscript, many times when there's a problem, it has to do with the feet. Someone did something with their feet or did not do something that they should have, and they're just moving in a way that doesn't make sense. It no longer makes sense. It's no longer practical. So very often, I'd say probably half the time, the problem actually lies in the feet. They're so focused on the technique with the hands and the swords that they end up getting in these really compromised positions, and they don't notice it. So that's something to look out for yourself. If you're coaching, that's something to look out with your students or your partners and help them through that. One more thing with footwork is I would encourage you to add variety to your footwork. If you only do passing steps by themselves, if you only do adjustment steps or gathering steps by themselves, they lose a lot of their effectiveness and it won't translate as well into your fencing. So just as we'll have several videos in this series, I encourage you to throw some variety in there. Put them together either in a logical way or in a completely random way. Force your body to move in different ways and get comfortable with it so that no matter what situation you find yourself in while you're fencing, you at least won't have to worry about knowing where to put your feet. So thanks a lot, guys, and we will come at you with the next video very soon.